Hi guys, how you all doing? Great to have you back. So I have a video I would love to react to from the Diary of a CEO, and it says Dr. Gabor meets the shocking link between kindness and illness, guys.
70% of the adult population is at least on one medication. Quarter of women are on antidepressants. The rate of childhood is going up. Worldwide, there's this epidemic of distress.
What can we do about that?
So the first step would be to...
Dr. Gabor Mate,
legendary thinker,
celebrated speaker and best-selling author.
highly sought after for his expertise on addiction, trauma, childhood development, and stress.
People pleasers, these are the people that tend to develop diseases. When people don't know how to say no, the body will say no for them. That niceness is a repression of healthy anger, and that repression of healthy anger has huge implications to your health. And when you repress your immune system, you're more likely to have that immune system turn against you. People emotionally repressed are more likely to get cancer. And emotional repression is one of the impacts of childhood trauma.
We interrupt this film to tell you we are getting reports that
The People's Princess is dead.
Harry was a traumatized child. How he's told about his mother's death is that it was an accident, your mother didn't make it. His father touches Harry on the knee and says, but it'll be okay, and leaves the room. This 12-year-old, nobody held him. And children can be traumatized not just by terrible things happening to them, but just by not having their needs met. By not being seen, not being heard, not being held. Those are wounding for a child. But my interview with Prince Harry, I had a gut feeling all along that I shouldn't agree to do the interview. It really got to me. I lost myself.
What happened? Gabor, there's a question we often ask each other in flippant conversations, which we usually kind of brush away because it's the convenient thing to do.
Yeah.
That question is the question I wanted to start by asking you, which is, how are you?
Yeah. So that question is, for me, brings up, two dimensions. One is how am I at this present moment, which is, how am I at this moment, which is all there is. I'm well. I feel rather peaceful inside. I'm very happy to be here with you. If you'd asked me 2 days ago, I wouldn't have said that. I would have said I was feeling somewhat anxious and kind of troubled, So as a in the moment answer, I'm well, and I also know how to keep well as long as I stick with what I know. And when I forget what I know, then I can be very not well. And so the last year since we've met has been in many ways a tough year for me. Also one of deep learning. So if the question is how have I been, I'd say I've been up and down, and I've had real challenges that I've had to learn from. How am I right now? I'm really well, thank you.
2 days ago, if I had asked you that question, your answer would have been anxious and troubled.
Yeah.
Why?
I gave a talk on Monday night to 2,100 people, and I just didn't think I did my best here in London. And I thought, oh boy, I could have done better. I let people down. I allowed my self-judgments and self-doubts to really dominate my thinking. And, as much as I think I'm immune to that kind of self-doubt, evidently I'm not. So that's what happened.
When you say you let it cloud your thinking, what were the symptoms of that? So you gave a talk 2 days ago to 2,100 people.
Yeah.
And you didn't feel you did your best. You went home that night. What was going on in your head? What are the symptoms of that feeling?
Constant cyclical self-criticism of I could have been more present, I could have been more grounded, more attuned with the audience perhaps, but just all these self-criticisms which then are accompanied by certain feelings in the body, like kind of a roiling in my belly and so on. And that's what I went through.
And what was the remedy for that? Because we can all relate.
Yeah. Earlier this year, also feeling in a state of discombobulation, just a few months ago, I did something radical. I did a 2-week total sabbatical from the internet. No cell phone, no emails, no checking on Amazon how my books are doing, all this self-referential ego enhancement stuff, and it just really made a difference. By the end of 2 weeks, I was a different person, and so I'm keeping it up. And one of the things you learn is you start noticing these body states that you're in and the mental hoops that you jump through, but you don't identify with them. So what's the worst case scenario? I didn't do the best possible job. Okay, what's the headline in the newspaper? Human being fails to do his best on a particular occasion. What's the big deal? You know, so it's a matter of observing all this stuff and not identifying with it, not letting it take you over, as it tends to.
I was reading something that said when we vocalize or share our stress, it moves it from the emotional center of our brain to the much more rational center of our brain, where we can kind of step outside of the video game and hold the controller, per se.
Exactly. Yeah, it's the mid-frontal cortex of our brain that has insight and social connection and awareness, you know, which so often goes offline as soon as some emotion takes over, some anxiety or anger or resentment takes over. The mid-frontal cortex tends to go offline. And the more trauma you experience as a child, the more likely that is to happen, so that your insightful capacities, the executive functions, get taken over by some deeper emotional dynamics. And so one of the benefits to me of meditation is it restores that executive function, so that I'm not taken over or too long taken over by emotional dynamics that just sweep me away.
For 2 weeks this year, you said you went offline.
Yeah.
Why?
Sometimes people say to me, I've written this book that I know that you have on your desk, When the Body Says No, and my contention is when people don't know how to say no, the body will say it in the form of illness. And I can tell you hundreds of times people have said to me, your book has saved my life. And my response has always been, maybe I should read it myself. Because the fact is, I'm quite capable of giving advice and dispensing wisdom that I don't follow myself. And that was the case. So I became quite stressed, and my relationship with my wife, Ray, became very fraught. And she said, enough. Enough of this gap between who you are there in public and how you are in private. So that was a big incentive for me, because we're coming up to our 54th anniversary, and on the whole, I'd rather stay married than not. Everything else being considered. But also for myself, I don't want to be that guy anymore who can speak the truth that a lot of people consider to be the truth so articulately, but not follow it myself. So I just don't want to be that person, and that takes practice. And that's why I take the break from the internet. And what was interesting is I had my cell phone on airplane mode so nobody could get through to me. A couple of times a day, I'd still pick up the cell phone and I say, what are you doing? There's nothing on it because it's on the internet. But the compulsion to try and get something from the outside to fill some gap within, I just kept noticing it. By the end of 2 weeks, it wasn't so strong anymore. So I did it because I needed to, for the sake of my own mental health.
An up and down year for you, you said?
Yeah.
Is that the down you were talking about?
Well, I remember my conversation with you, and I think I remember you telling me that you had this goal of becoming a millionaire.
When I was younger, yeah.
When I was younger.
Yeah.
And then it's when you achieve that goal that you realize that ain't all there is, that you're still left very much with your internal demons. And that's a very common lesson. I mean, there's two ways to wake up. One is failure, where you keep asking yourself, but success is even more, because you think that once you get something, then you'll be happy. And, so I thought, okay, well, geez, so this book, The Myth of Normal, bestseller internationally and published in 35 languages, I should be happy. No, The more I got involved with it, and the more I toured with it, and the more engaged with the outside I became, the more miserable I became inside. So the very success of the book, and it allowed to it swept me away, and I lost myself, So that was one thing. And I did this very long, exhausting tour. I wasn't taking care of myself. And then there was my interview with Prince Harry and all the frou-frou around it, before it and after it, and I allowed that to take me over as well.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, in retrospect, I can see what happened, but at the time I was too caught up in it to notice, So what I'm saying is that it doesn't matter what I know if I don't pay attention, rigorous attention to what's going on inside, and if I keep looking to the outside to give me meaning and give me validation, then I can lose myself. And that's what happened.
Your interview with Prince Harry, how did that cause you to lose yourself?
Well, in two ways. One is I had a gut feeling all along that I shouldn't agree to doing it the way they set it up. Because the way it was set up is, in order to watch it, people have to buy a copy of Harry's book. And I thought, this is not fair. 4 million people have already bought the book. Why can't I watch this interview? Do they have to buy another copy? In other words, I believed that there should be a free public service on a part of two people who can have a very interesting conversation. But out of sheer opportunism, I agreed to it. So I didn't follow my gut feelings. So I lost myself even in agreeing to the format. And afterwards, Harry and I both wanted it released to the public for free, but the lawyer said you can't do that because this was advertised as a one-time only event, and there could be a class action suit. So the result was that I agreed to something that I didn't really like. Not that I didn't like the idea of talking with him. I didn't like the idea of putting this behind a paywall. So I lost myself just in agreeing to it, number one. Number two, then there was the incredible social media and British media reaction to it that was, for the most part, so negative and so demeaning and so dismissive and so distorted that I barely even know how to talk about it. I thought by this age I would know better, but you know what? It really got to me. It really got to me. I mean, I can give you examples, but eventually what happened was that I was really in a negative state of mind. And have you read the book, The Fox, the Mole, the Horse, and the Boy and the Horse?
I bought it last week. It's upstairs in my bag.
Wonderful. So great. It's a great little book, a great big book, although very few words in it, mostly just these wonderful drawings. Charlie McKeesy, he's really channeling wisdom in that book. And the horse is the most grounded of the four characters, of the four friends. And he's asked, what's the most courageous things you've ever said? And the horse says, help. So it's so difficult to ask for help. But I did, in the middle of all this frou-frou and my upset. And I called a friend of mine, a psychiatrist. And I said, I'm just in a bad state. And he said, what's going on for you? And I said, well, there's all this bad press and all the social media distortion of who I am and my motives. He said, what is it about that bothers you so much? And I said, not being seen. Not being seen is one of the needs of the child. But he said to me, okay, look, Gabor, when you were an infant, you're not being seen for who you are as a human being almost cost you your life, which it did. As soon as he said that, I said, yeah, this isn't about the present. This is an old, unresolved, not yet fully resolved wound. Age 79, I'm still upset at not being seen. I don't care if people agree with me or if you refute my ideas, but I want them to see me and what I'm actually saying, not some distorted version created by their own minds. And when he said that not being seen really threatened your life, I said, yeah, that's what's going on. And then I could relax. So what somebody else says? I don't live in the British press. I don't live in somebody else's mind. Here I am, let them think and say what they say. But it took somebody to wake me up to that. So that's what happened.
You said you could share examples of how it got to you.
Yeah. Well, oh boy. They called me a stern, overbearing merchant of pain. You know, at some point in the interview, you know, when Harry was, and the other thing was, see, Harry really was a traumatized child, and you can, when you read his book, you can see why. You know, and people couldn't understand how this is possible. How could somebody so privileged at the very apex of society in gilded palaces be traumatized? Total misunderstanding of trauma. It's true. People have it much tougher in many ways, but as an infant, as a sensitive infant, to be born into a loveless marriage where the father's having an affair even before he's born, where the mother's a troubled, very sensitive, very creative, warm-hearted, but very unbalanced young woman. So Harry describes in his book, Spare, that he's 12 years old when his mother is killed. How he's told about his mother's death is that his father, then Prince Charles, comes into his room early in the morning and says, something terrible happened, there was an accident, your mother didn't make it. Then there's a few moments of awkward silence, and finally Charles touches Harry on the knee and says, but it'll be okay, and leaves the room. And this is how this 12-year-old was told. Nobody held him. Charles himself was only doing what happened to him. When Queen Elizabeth went on an international 4 or 5 month royal tour, leaving the 5-year-old kid behind, when she returned to England, she greeted him by shaking his hand. And now, what I said to Harry was that even animals hold and touch their kids. They're infants, mammals, that's what they do. Because mother rats, when the baby is born, they lick their babies. And the way the mother rat licks the baby, this has been shown in laboratory, influences the brain development of the child. And those babies that get the right kind of licking, it's called grooming, they have better brains as adults. Premature infants used to be put in incubators and nobody used to touch them. Then it was found out that if just by stroking their backs 10 minutes a day, that promotes healthy brain development. And the great British American anthropologist Ashley Montagu wrote a book called Skin, The Human Significance of Touch. So I was saying that touch is important. You're not being held and not being touched was a deprivation. And I said mammals, monkeys. You know what happens when a baby elephant is born? This is fascinating. The mother, I read this in the book called The Evolved Nest, for which I wrote the preface by a wonderful psychologist called Darcia Narvaez. When an infant elephant is born and the mother goes into labor, all the other mother elephants stand around in a circle. When the infant plops on the ground, they all stroke them with their trunks. So touch and being held is so important for mammals. And I was saying, animals do that. This journalist, who I don't know what she was listening to, said, I said the royal family treats like kids like animals. I said, no, I wish they'd had. So, I mean, the distortion is just laughable if I hadn't taken it so personally, for the reasons I already explained.
For you to take it so personally, which led you to call a psychiatrist, a man like you with the knowledge you have that writes books about the mind and stress and the body and all these things, you must have been in a pretty dark place.
I was in a dark place, and I wasn't, but look, I'm a human being like the rest, and what Charlie McKeesey says in that book is that the most courageous thing you can do is ask for help. It's true. You know, there's that, I don't know if you remember the Beatles song, Help, I Need Somebody, and John Lennon sings, when I was younger, so much younger than today, I didn't need anybody's help in any way. But now those days are gone, I'm much less self-assured. He's actually saying that when he was younger, he believed he didn't need help. But the reason he believed he didn't need help, that he has to make it on his own, because he was so traumatized as a child. His father left him when he was born. His mother left. He was brought up by an aunt. And Lennon grows up feeling abandoned, that I can do this on my own. I don't need anybody, you know? And later on, he realizes, I need help. But actually, we're all born needing help. We're all born needing to be understood, to be attuned with, to be seen, to have our emotions received and validated. That's one of the essential needs of children, as I make the point in the myth of normal. And children can be traumatized not just by terrible things happening to them, but just by not having their needs met. By not being seen, not being heard, not being held. Those are wounding for a child, which is what the meaning of the word trauma means. So you don't need terrible things to happen. It's so difficult for people to understand that. You know, they think for trauma, you need horrific events. Well, horrific events can be very traumatic, but you can wound people, sensitive people. The sensitive child, or any child, can be hurt just because the parents are too stressed and unavailable emotionally to really see them for who they are.
I've struggled with that in my life, especially being a CEO, I think. I've struggled to ask for help when I need it, because you kind of see yourself as the helper. And also, I've struggled with the idea, maybe, I don't know where I got this story from, that people like me, maybe because I'm a man, maybe because I'm the head of businesses, we have to figure it out on our own. And the cost of repressing how I feel has become more and more evident over time.
Yeah, how so?
Just like, I think, I when I was younger, I never experienced anxiety before. And then as I had more difficult moments in business where I tried to solve the problem in my mind, were the first times at like 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, that I experienced like fully fledged, what I'd call anxiety, where I just couldn't get a thought out of my head, and I felt it in my body. My breath was short, this constant state of like angst.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just thought I could deal with it myself. I thought I could think my way through it.
Yeah.
Was that the hardest moment in terms of your own psychology in your adult life in recent times?
Let me answer that question in a moment, but let me ask you a question that occurs to me, if I may.
Yeah, please.
It's like with beautiful women. They sometimes have a very hard time because they can never know that somebody want me for who I really am, or they're just attracted to my physical features. So for somebody who at a young age becomes quite wealthy and successful, how do you know when somebody's approaching you? Are they approaching you because they want something from you, or because they really care about you? I mean, that must be a problem for you, I imagine.
100%. 100%. You never really understand what your relationships are.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Huh. So it must be confusing sometimes.
It is. And I typically fall back onto the relationships I had before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I can trust those ones.
Yeah.
So I have the same, my best friends, the people I spend my time with, on my birthday, there's five people there.
Yeah.
Are the 5 people that were there 10 years ago.
Yeah. Unless, I think, we get reconnected to our gut feelings. Then our gut feelings will tell us what is real and what isn't. But the problem for many of us is that we get disconnected from our gut feelings very early in life. Like in this room of 2100 at the Troxy on Monday night, I think I asked this question, I always do it. Have you had the experience of having a strong gut feeling about something and not paying attention to it, ignoring it, and being sorry afterwards? Almost everybody puts their hand up. That's a sign of childhood wounding, because we're born connected to our gut feelings. No baby is disconnected from their gut feelings. Something happens to make us disconnect.
What is a gut feeling? From a physiological perspective, because gut feeling is used as a word to describe, an intuition or,
Well, real gut feelings really happen in the gut. In the Western way of looking at it, we tend to look upon the intellect and the intellectual brain as the only brain that we have. But actually, our brain is a far more complicated structure. And our heart has a nervous system, which is connected to the brain up here. And there's a kind of knowing in the heart. Sometimes people say, I knew in my heart. And they did, if they're connected. Gut feelings are what all animals possess. It warns them of danger, or when it's safe and when it isn't safe.
Not in the brain.
the gut is connected to the brain.
Right.
The gut sends more connections to the brain than the brain sends to the gut. And the gut has more of the neurotransmitter serotonin in it than the brain does. So that the gut things are here to tell us about what is safe and what isn't. And when the brain in the gut and the brain in the heart and the brain up here in the head are connected, then we're grounded and present and very alert and very aware of what's going on. But when childhood trauma interferes with those connections, which it does, then we start to just work from up here, and we can think we can figure things just from up here. But actually, when you think about human beings, where did we evolve? We evolved for millions of years out in nature. How long does any creature in nature survive if they don't pay attention to their gut feelings? So to go back to your question about me, I really used to believe into my 40s that everybody else could be stressed, but I couldn't be. And it's like you and your anxiety. I think the reason I didn't feel the stress because I had coping mechanisms, like working hard and getting people's attention or using my smarts and having status and all this kind of stuff, And then that broke down. I realized I could be stressed like everybody else, but literally I had this belief. I mean, it's almost unbelievable to me now that I used to believe that everybody else could be stressed, but I couldn't be.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Your wife, when you went through that dark moment, if I was her, what would I have observed?
Well, first of all, and I talk about this in The Myth of Normal, and Ray, my wife, came on stage at the Troxy on Monday night and talked about this. I asked her to. Women have 80% of autoimmune disease in this society. So that diseases where the immune system attacks the body happens to women much more than to men. Things like rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, inflammatory diseases of the gut, and so on. Why? So those diseases tend to happen to people, not just according to my own observation, although it's very much my own observation. When I was working in family practice and palliative care, before I did addiction medicine, I noticed that who got sick and who didn't wasn't accidental. That's the subject of my book, When the Body Says No. And then again, in The Myth of Normal, people tended to be compulsively concerned with the emotional needs of others rather than their own, identified with duty, role, and responsibility, so their work in the world rather than their own true selves. They tended to suppress healthy anger, so they tend to be very, very nice and peacemakers. And they tended to believe that they're responsible for how other people feel and that they must never disappoint anybody. Two fatal beliefs. So these are the people that, according to my observation, but according to a whole lot of research as well, that I didn't even know about, but have since found, elegant research, these are the people that tend to develop autoimmune disease. Now, in this society, which gender is more acculturated, programmed to suppress their healthy anger, to be the peacemakers, to be the caregivers? Women. This is a function of a reality that a lot of people deny, but it's a patriarchal society, which we can talk about, but it's not a conspiracy. It's just how it works. So me in my marriage expect my wife to absorb my stresses. And if I'm unhappy, guess who I blame? And who do I take it out on? So she would experience somebody who's can be hostile for no reason and blaming, and she has to walk around eggshells. Now, thank God she's not the type to do that for too long, and at some point she'll call my bluff, and then I either wake up or she says, thank you very much, but enough of this, And so she would experience somebody who was irritable and unreasonably blaming and not taking care of their own needs, and then expecting her to take care of them for me. And we both had to grow up. Now, she was programmed that way as a child. Her parents had a lot of problems, and she became the peacemaker and a caregiver emotionally. And then she carries that role into her marriage with me. And here's what the bad news is for people. We always marry somebody at the same level of emotional development or trauma resolution as we are. So when we met, we were two traumatized people, not even realizing it. And then we played out our traumas, and I played it out in the typical male way, which is to be aggressive and demanding and resentful if she wasn't around to mother me. And that's what she would have seen. And this dynamic can still arise, except when it does, she puts a stop to it right away. And I have the grace and the wisdom by now to understand, yeah, I'm doing it again. In fact, I haven't done it since then because I just don't want to be that guy, you know. But that's what she would have seen.
And what was going on inside your head? Were you anxious? Were you depressed?
I was anxious, and then I want her soothing. I want her. How should I say this? There's an interesting sexual dynamic between men and women that men very often unconsciously expect their women to mother them, to give them the mothering that they didn't fully receive as kids. And the women take on that role because they're acculturated in this society to do that. But then what happens sexually? No healthy guy wants to sleep with his mother, and no healthy woman wants to sleep with her son, so that the ardor and the passion kind of drains out because of this unconscious dynamic of women mothering men and men demanding that they do. So then I become frustrated. And then who do I blame for that? I blame her, rather than looking at how did I contribute to, how did I help create this situation? So all that stuff played out in our marriage, and we've had to learn a lot from what didn't work.
In my relationship, when I was most anxious, it's also when my relationship nearly ended with my partner, because like you said, I inadvertently took it out on her because I felt that she should understand how I'm feeling and basically adapt to me.
Exactly.
And she didn't. And so there was conflict because I felt like she was misunderstanding me.
Yeah.
And wasn't like acting in the right way to meet the needs that I had. Like she couldn't understand, you know, and so that I think I wore her down. And then there was kind of like, as you say, that ultimatum moment where she's basically saying, listen, shall I just go?
Yeah. And what you probably didn't do, and what I didn't do for a long time, is just to go to her and say, you know what, I'm feeling anxious.
Yeah, that's what happened after.
And I'm feeling unsettled. And I realized that I have resentful feelings towards you, you know. Instead of owning it, we act it out.
Yeah.
And then why don't they understand us?
Yeah.
You know, and actually, so what we're actually demanding is that we can be children emotionally, and they be the mothers who, without any effort on our part, will understand and see us, you know. And this is a strong dynamic in men-female relationships. And what tends to happen is that women at some point get to if they're healthy enough. Now, if they're not strong enough to assert themselves, you know what happens? They get sick. And I know this is a mouthful, but a lot of women's cancers and autoimmune diseases are precisely because of this self-repression. And I could talk about that at great length, the physiology of it. But either the body will somehow say no for them. That's why women are much more likely to be on antidepressants, because they're taking a medication for both of them. You know, and so either the woman gets ill somehow, or she asserts herself and says, I'm not doing this anymore. At which point, the guy will go seeking a younger mother who's not yet mature enough to assert herself. And this happens all the time in relationships.
The cost of self-repression, the cost of sort of emotional repression. I think everybody is guilty at some point in their life of repressing their emotions. I think men do it a lot as well. I mean, if you look at the suicidality in the UK amongst men.
Men tend to act it out on themselves like that,
What is the cost of self-repression? Now, you talked about the physiological mechanism of what's going on when we repress our emotions and how we feel.
It's been well studied, not just by me, but others, and documented, that repression of healthy anger disturbs the immune system. Now, Why should that be the case? Now, healthy anger is simply when somebody is intruding on your space and they won't desist. You say, "You're in my space, get out." That's healthy anger. It's in the moment. When it's done its job, it's finished with. It's different from chronic rage, which is a whole other thing. No, in other words, anger is a boundary defense. That's all it is. Animals do it. Get out of my space. Now, the emotional system in general has the job, the human emotional system in general has the role of allowing in what is nurturing and loving and healthy and welcome, and to keep out what isn't. That's the job of the emotional system. Let me ask you a trick question. What's the job of the immune system? Okay, I'll answer. Is to keep out what is unhealthy and unwelcome and toxic, and to let in what is nurturing and healthy. So the immune system is being called a floating brain. It is memory, it is reactive capacity. And it allows in nutrients and vitamins and healthy bacteria, and keeps out and destroys what isn't, toxins and unhealthy invading organisms and so on. In other words, the immune system and the emotional system have exactly the same role. That's the first point. The second point is they're not separate systems. Physiologically speaking, the emotional system, the nervous system, hormonal apparatus, and the immune system are all one system. And there's a whole new science, when I say new, 60, 70, 80 years old, called psychoneuroimmunology, that studies the unity. So it's not even that all these things are connected, they're one. So therefore, when you're suppressing one aspect of it, you're also suppressing the other. So people that repress healthy anger, they have diminished immune activity. And this has been demonstrated. So the repression of emotions has a physiological function. And when you repress your immune system, you're more likely to have that immune system turn against you or to fail you when it comes to malignancy. The immune system, like you and I have cancer cells in our bodies probably every day because nature makes mistakes. That's not a problem. The immune system recognizes them as cancer cells don't have on their surfaces markers that our normal cells do. So the immune system says, this is a foreigner, it's an enemy, I'm going to destroy it. But when you repress your emotions, you can also undermine your immune system, and now your immune system will not recognize the malignancy and not destroy it, and allows it to proliferate. There was a British surgeon in the 1960s who operated on, am I talking too much?
No, you're not. There's no such thing on this podcast.
Okay. Because I just get so passionate about this stuff. And the reason I get so passionate about it is because it's so important in healing, and we as physicians could do so much more for people if we understood these scientific facts, but we don't as a profession. Anyway, there's a British thoracic surgeon called David Kisson in the 1960s who noticed what I noticed in my practice, that people emotionally repressed are more likely to get lung cancer. Now, it's true that most people who get lung cancers are smokers, but out of 100 smokers, only about 10 or 15 get lung cancer, which doesn't mean that smoking isn't the major contributor to lung cancer. It is. But he found that it was those of his patients that were emotionally repressed that were likely to get the lung cancer as a result of the smoking. And the more repressed they were, the less smoking they had to do in order to get lung cancer. This guy noticed this in the 1960s. So emotional repression has huge implications physiologically. And emotional repression is one of the impacts of childhood trauma.
Why?
The child is born with some fundamental needs. One of them, as I've articulated earlier, is for attachment, for closeness, proximity, unconditional loving acceptance by caring adults. Not just a human child. All mammalian children have that need. Without that, they don't survive. So that's called attachment. The seeking of closeness and proximity for the purpose of being taken care of or to take care of the other. And our brains are wired for attachment. We have circuits in our brain dedicated to the attachment relationships. And that's so important all through our lives, but especially when we're infants and young children. Now, but we have another need. We've already talked about it. I just haven't named it.
What an epic, interesting, impactful interview. I enjoyed every bit of it. Dr. Meat has served humanity as far as concerned. He always hit the nail on the head. I love his wise, humble, yet admit his fault. I love everything that makes him human. And guys, you need to understand that self-love, self-care, self-awareness is not selfishness. Always know your limits. Find peace, find balance, and always consider yourself first. You come first before any other person. You really need to learn how to take care of yourself. Learn when to say no, when to stop. That's when you can actually give your best. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. See you on the next one. Please support your girl by watching, liking, and subscribing to my YouTube channel. Always take care of yourself. Be at peace with yourself. Bye-bye.